What are the biggest challenges that contractors face when setting up their own contracts?
Yeah, there's a lot right now in this generative AI world about drafting contracts, and so many people are saying like, well, can we do this in the construction industry? Go find me the contractor that gets to draft their own contracts, and I'll tell you that you found the unicorn. Everything rolls downhill in our industry. Owners, like at least in my experience, and like 99% of the time, would source their own contracts. I think the one area that I've seen where it's systematically not this way is like for custom home building. A lot of times the homeowners, the home builders will build, will do the contractor. When I just renovated my bathroom at home, we didn't get to source the contract. But in commercial construction, owners source the contracts, I would say 99% of the time. Then that contract gets flowed down to the or trade contractors from the general, and so on and so on and so on. So I would say the biggest challenge that contractors have in drafting their contracts is that they don't really get the opportunity to draft their own contracts. But I think otherwise, like if I spin your question, I don't know if you've met this, like, plenty of generals draft their own subcontracts. And I think the biggest challenge is ensuring that subcontract, the boilerplate is flexible enough where you can take whatever risks you've bought in the prime contract and make sure that you're balancing them vis-a-vis your sub framework as well, because there's nothing worse in the general contractor's perspective than when the owner has a claim against the general, but the general doesn't have the same claim against the responsible trade partner. That can become a real issue. And I think, similarly, the trade partners oftentimes are like, well, I look at the subcontract, but are you looking at the prime contract? Because there's a really good chance that you're buying whatever's in the prime contract. So again, an awareness issue, but I think that's the biggest challenge, I would say, ensuring that consistency. But otherwise, I would say, go find me the contractor that says they get to draft their own. We should do a poll coming out of this podcast for any of your listeners that are generals or trade contractors. What percentage of them get to source their own contracts to the party, up on the chain? The answer is going to be a small number.
Well, maybe I can give a group, give an example. So by the way, I love your example of the subcontractor there. We do have a lot of listeners that are like smaller contractors working on residential projects. I'll even use myself as an example. Back in the day, I used to have one of the larger landscaping companies up in Ontario, but we did a lot of residential jobs, right? We'd go in, we'd install a pool, we'd install a front backyard landscape. So the contract was kind of on us. One of the things that we used to do is we'd lean on industry associations and take some of their like standard terms. So I think that's kind of where I was building that question from. But I wonder if you work with groups like that.
So I would say that if you had the opportunity to do so, the industry associations and some of the standard templates are while they may not be perfect or optimal, they're certainly a reasonable starting point, and frankly, I believe, again, my opinion, not the rule. I believe in many circumstances, those forms are pretty sufficient. I'm sure there's a lot of very high paid lawyers that if they were listening to this would say, absolutely not. You gotta, tweak it. And yes, I get it. To go from good to great, maybe you would need to tweak it. But the reality is, and this, we're all in business now. Sometimes settling for good to get a deal done or to move the deal along is just fine. And I think that those industry forms and templates are pretty, by and large, I'm a proponent of them.
Do you think thinking about the settlements, is a lot of this, does it end up in splitting the difference? Or do people fight right to the very last penny?
You're talking about on the negotiation of the contract?
Yeah. No, pass. So when something goes wrong.
I think it really depends. I think, again, let's go back to this concept of awareness. I think when you have awareness early on of where your strengths and weaknesses are, you can your desire to fight about things should be directly correlated to that. And so, my opinion, Kevin, is there's very rarely a dispute, which goes to like some of the problem that we're trying to solve for document crunch. Never in my career, having been involved in billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in construction projects, never in my career have I had a major claim come to my desk and me call that project team in and say, "Oh, let's see what you got. Put your cards on the table." Never have I said, "Oh, wow, we're going to crush this. I want to take this to the Supreme Court of the United States. Never.
Right.
Because if there's a dispute, that probably means that somewhere along the way, there became pluses and minuses to that issue, or else they wouldn't be in my office because it would have been settled in the project trailer. Like it would have been
Right.
obvious and it would have just been resolved and done. So I guess my point is, I think that, people that are well positioned in claims have awareness early on.
Yep.
And, I should say threshold to compromise is probably directly correlated to the strength of their claim. I think what you find oftentimes, Kevin, is people go into these, like in the contract negotiation, without the benefit of a team that did all the right things during the course of construction, which we're trying to help at Document Crunch. B, that not necessarily being communicated fully. And then C, the other side putting their cards on the table at some point in time, and everyone's saying, oh, shoot, we just wasted a lot of time and a lot of money fighting something that maybe we should have compromised, early on.
Yeah.
You also have, I hate to say this, but you also have the more stakeholders that come in that, have, adverse maybe interests. Like there's whole cottage industries that are built around claims and, so all that stuff just adds layers of uncertainty and expense onto things. And again, like it's my fundamental position that if you can arm people with good information at the project level at the onset, like if I was sitting in a job trailer and the owner said, you can't use contingency for that, which happens.
Sure.
Maybe there's a situation where I would say, well, hold on. Here is the contract. Of course we can use it. It says it plain as day. What are we talking about? Here's the change order. Sign it, and let me go buy you a beer. Like, let's just move. Like, this is what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen because teams aren't confident to challenge in a good way, to push back in a good way, to have a discussion, a collaborative discussion where there's transparency and equal access to information. And that's the difference.